and welcome to this episode of Rule of Carnage. This is a series of conversations between myself, Glenn Ford, a games designer and developer, and my good friend Mike Hutchinson, also a games designer and developer, where we discuss designing and developing and examining miniatures games to try and make them better. So we've been doing a little series of how we might redesign or reimagine sort of existing game properties. And the most recent conversation that you can see is us talking about Lord of the Rings Middle-earth strategy battle game and how we would design a Lord of the Rings game, what we would find interesting in Tolkien's world, how we would develop it. And one of the comments on that video that popped up was asking for maybe something a bit more gritty or detailed about the mechanics, what we would redesign, what we wouldn't redesign, why we would go in. Because partly, I think in that conversation, we were talking more about the sort of the scenario campaign meta structure that we might build for it. Sort of commented, frankly, because I think that Lord of the Rings strategy battle game has a really good core system. I don't know how much I'd want to sort of mess around with it. So in response
But of course, the curse of a games designer is one can always mess around with things and start monkeying about,
yeah,
pulling cogs out and going, "What does this do? I'm sure this doesn't do anything." Whew.
yeah, we can always have a tinker. So we thought we might have a chat like a bit more in detail about the mechanics of Middle-earth strategy battle game, the things we think do work and don't work, and the things we might consider fiddling around with. Funnily enough, we just recently played a few Lord of the Rings scenarios just this weekend, and one of the things that came out. So I think the first scenario we played was the Weathertop scenario, and so one of the things. I really like the emergent narrative things that Lord of the Rings does. I don't know if I keep referring to it as the Middle-earth strategy battle game because it's quite a mouthful. But there's some things I really like that game does with the emergent narratives that it can tell. And the game that we played on the weekend of Weathertop did that, I think, really beautifully. It exactly sort of fell into place of the rhythm and the way it should go. So for those who don't know, that scenario is well, it's Weathertop, probably familiar with the movie, where the hobbits are there camping, and because they've lit a fire to cook sausages on, the Nazgul get attracted and turn up and attack. And then Aragorn rolls in and sort of saves them all.
Yes, you start with four hobbits
Yeah,
totally surrounded by like immortal death wizards, and you're like, "Well, this ain't going to end well."
yeah, and it was like I really enjoyed it partly because like I think because I played a bit more Middle-earth strategy battle game than you and the other guy we were playing with, and
Yeah,
I was more aware of how tight the scenario was. Like I think all the way through it, and it wasn't until the last few turns that you guys who were playing the good guys suddenly went, "Oh, wow, this is actually really tight. This is really close," and it came down to like I had to make a couple of desperation moves at the end, and it came down to like the casting of the last spell before the good guys won, and it was
yeah. Before we knew, yeah, because you were threatening Frodo right at the very last moment. If it had gone a different way, the ring would have been yours, and everything
yeah,
would have been
yeah. I think
over.
yeah, he had one wound, and I cast a last sort of black dart spell, and it didn't quite go off, and so
Four up for the win.
yeah, then Nazgul faded off into the night, and so it was like it worked absolutely perfectly, and I think the first thing that I would say I really would not change about Middle-earth strategy battle game is the might will faint point system generally, because I think that it's absolutely the part of that system that builds up so much emergent narrative. So for those who are sort of unaware, in middle of strategy battle game, the heroes have three fungible resources, um, namely might, will, and fate. And basically, might is a thing a hero can spend to, frankly, perform particularly heroic actions. They can act outside of the initiative system by calling heroic moves. They can make heroic strikes that hit more skillfully and more powerfully. They can use heroic accuracy to thread a arrow through multiple opponents to hit somebody that shouldn't be able to sort of be pinned down because they're like covered by intervening bodies and etc. etc.
Hmm.
Will is uh, the system that magic revolves around. So you have to spend will to cast spells and then spend will to resist spells. And fate is the saving throw system. Basically, you can spend a fate point.
And that one's sorry, you carry on.
So you can spend a fate point to roll a dice when you lose your last wound, well, any wound, but you usually do it for your last wound. And on a 4-up, fate intervened and the mighty hero survived.
Yeah, and I think the first few times I played the game, like that one was the one that jumped out as like so different to other games. Pretty much everything only has one wound, and then you've got this resource that's burning down.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like the way that those points are distributed amongst certain heroes are some of the ways in which they've really smartly built in the emergent narrative of the movie's beats. So, a few examples are, for example, Boromir has like one of the highest fight values in the game. He has a huge stock of might point, like more might points than I think any other character, but he has zero fate. So basically, if he gets into combat, he can just stack might points on dice, and his huge fight value means that he's virtually indestructible and he can lawnmower entire armies.
And the reason for that is because the way that the combat system works is that you make a dice off, and then the winner of the combat is the only person that deals damage. So if you are good in fighting, you never even have to make saving throws. You never even are at risk of suffering damage.
Exactly. But if he gets hit by an arrow, which his fight value has nothing, there's no like dodging out the way of arrows in the system. Um, he has no fate, so he just gets just burst by arrow fire, which is obviously perfect for the narrative of the movie. The Boromir is untouchable in close combat, but if some Urukai walks up with a nasty bow, he
Mm,
suddenly turns into an absolute pincushion.
mm.
Or similarly, the Balrog has great fight, loads of might, a decent amount of fate, and no will. So he essentially, if you come at him with like mortal weapons, you're just going to get absolutely crushed. If you've got
Mm.
one basic wizard with like a simple transfix spell, he's essentially powerless. Because of course the Balrog is weak against Gandalf, for example, who can take him down in one-on-one combat. So
Mm.
it's like repeatedly those values are used to build the narrative, particularly of the arc of the movie storylines. And I think those are what make the game really sing as a narrative way of playing through the scenes of the movie. Unfortunately, I do think they're the thing that make it struggle as a strategy battle game, um, because there's quite a lot of tracking, and particularly in the version we were playing, which, fun enough, I was more familiar with the previous version because that's where I played a lot of games of it. In the previous version, heroic abilities were a much shorter and specific list. In the version we were playing, there's the generic heroic abilities, which are moving and shooting, etc. And then everybody has like a bespoke list of other heroic abilities that, that weren't in those previous editions, and some people can do and some people can't do. And when you've got like a whole army and you've got maybe 4 characters, all with different stocks of might, all with different menus of what they can do with their might, it can get a little heavy on the cognitive load.
I mean, even with a simple scenario like the Weathertop scenario, where you had 5 models, each of them had 3 of these trackable
Hmm.
stats, And so you're dealing with 25 different little dice or token towers or pools of, or and actually the most recent one of the recent white dwarfs came with some little like character cards, which are just insanely useful. Like they're little hero quests sort of style cards for the characters. And once I had that and I was able to like write down and scrub off my might, will, and fate points, that seemed like it seemed like a piece of UI that should have existed 25 years ago. Because it's
Yeah,
a really like I agree with everything that you've said, although I want to have a little chat about fate points. But like the first touch of that system was just like, oh God, there's so much tracking here, particularly because when you play when you play with the fellowship or the ring wraiths, you like everyone's got these things to track, which is fine. Or if you're foolish like me and are just like, I've got some guys that look like rangers, let me build a rangers army, and literally every model in my army has three little stacks of tokens that have to follow them around in a battle game.
mm,
So I think that like the UI of it is out of the, and this is I think something that's quite common in miniature games. Like the miniature game had a good system in it and then provided no real advice about how to track that. And I think as an indie game designer, I'm always thinking about like what's the UI, what's the actual play experience of the table going to involve tracking these things, and then making design decisions like, maybe I should have one fewer resources or something because actually it's a pain in the ass to keep track of these things. That's certainly something that's been going round my head with A Billion Suns over the last
mm.
couple of months. And so I think in this case, it's like the damn game was printed in a box. Like it could have come with a tear pad of blank character sheets or something with little pencil boxes that I can write in pencil and erase the dots out or whatever, but it didn't. And so, yeah. And so you
Yeah,
ended up with a big piece of paper with like lots of dice and, hoping to remember to flip the right one round because all of your models are kind of the same anyway. And it's like, all right, so I've got to paint numbers on the back of my ring wraith so I know which one's
yeah.
which.
And again, and I do think that that's the thing that comes from like the core original idea of the game is like if you've got the fellowship, you don't have to know who Aragorn is. Everybody knows who Aragorn is. So it's like, so long
Yeah,
as
I
you,
mean, if you've got Fatty Bulger on the table, like, you know about it.
yeah, absolutely. So it's like when you've got the fellowship, the idea of being like, well, how do I remember which one of them is Gandalf? Is like, are you serious? He's like
Yeah,
the most
yeah.
iconic. Whereas like again, because we were playing that scenario and I had five ring wraiths who are all identical, have identical stats, identical abilities, but different trackable.
And we talked in last episode about how like maybe one of the problems with writing a Lord of the Rings game is that like the the evil player just kind of gets the short end of the wedge here. And like you do draw a short straw here as well, where it's just like, well, no one really knows, like not even you know which model is which, and like, very like obviously having goblin captains is fun and some of them are named and stuff, but like you don't know which one's Guzbutt and which one's Hairy Scrang or whatever.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's like again, the second scenario we played, which was Balin's Tomb, you were playing the goblins.
Mm.
And it very much felt like, I wouldn't want to be the evil player in this because you're getting is like the people, whoever's running the fellowship are getting a pure power fantasy of like Aragorn running in and just mowing goblins down and not even get close to being touched. Whilst what the evil player gets to do is feed goblins into an Aragorn
Yeah,
shapeshifter.
and I don't know if there was a cleverer strategy that I could have implemented. Probably I could have a little think about it, but like you're absolutely right. Like the goblin side of the table was essentially a mechanical Turk that like you guys could have operated my side of the table and it would have been the same gaming experience.
Yeah, yeah, and I think again it's one of those things with like narrative scenarios which sometimes require a player to play in a very specific way to make it work because like when we played that scenario, I think you were sort of going, if I get enough bodies on Boromir, he will go down. And it's like,
Mm.
no, he absolutely won't. He's just going to
No, in fact, the
repeatedly.
more you put on, the more he plays his little saxophone.
Yeah, absolutely. Gets his little horn out and just blasts back five people and stabs up two of them and they jump on them, etc. etc. And what would have made it sort of closer would be like evilly targeting the squishy little hobbits, and and
Yeah,
spreading.
which I mean, I did send more than maybe I spent maybe half of my goblins round the flanks to try and achieve such a thing, but it wasn't. It was I should have sent like one goblin to pin down
Yeah,
Boromir,
yeah,
and then spent everybody else charge forward, charge past him.
yeah, absolutely. So it's sort of sometimes these narratives can depend upon like the players clicking things that are non-obvious, and I do think like
Maybe, although I think like to a degree, the game experience we got by me playing like a dumb goblin was fairly consistent with like the scene in the movie and stuff. So like it wasn't a disappointing outcome.
mm,
It's really different that like doing the sort of schoolboy obvious tactic resulted in a reasonably decent game,
mm,
and but there was a more clever one that might have resulted in something more tactically crunchy, as opposed to you know the trap that they didn't fall into thanks to probably playtesting and experience of the designer, which was, oh, the obvious way to play just results in something really bad or really broken or really disengaging-y. Like
yeah,
if
no,
if the scenario had said, oh, do you know what? Because I think even in the book, there's a second door at the back, and the whole point of the scene in the book is that they have to get to the other door and then escape before the goblins arrive. And so you could have written it like that, and it would have
mm,
been a terrible scenario
mm.
because the right thing to do would be to walk all the models off the board in turn one, and then the game would be over.
Yeah, yeah, and it and
But they
and
didn't write it that way.
yeah, and what it is it's a scenario that, like you say, hits the correct narrative beats in that there are, oh my god, look at all these goblins, and then, well, but all the heroes make it through because they're heroes and they're goblins, and that's how these things should be.
Yeah, and it really makes me want to play more of those like original scenarios that were written at the beginning of the game's history,
Mm.
and sort of, I don't know, enjoy the fact that they're clearly very well tested and tuned.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that sort of initial, here's the fellowship, here's the fellowship's journey sort of scenario set are the strongest place, are where that game sings at its absolute best, because frankly that's what it was initially built to do. And I
Yeah.
think that the later massed battle game is more of a sort of add-on to that works in various ways because of other clever things I think that were put into the system, but other bits become a little bit heavier in there. So I think the main thing that works, that works most strongly in the strategy battle version is the puzzle of engagement zones. So what Lord of the Rings has is that everybody has a 1 inch engagement zone bubble, and you can't move into an engagement zone bubble of anybody unless you are charging, unless you are going to engage somebody. You can enter somebody else's engagement zone if you're going to charge somebody else, basically. Um, and so when you're playing the sort of the full strategy battle game, how you place those bubbles to protect vulnerable units from charges, and then how you use heroic moves to engage certain units and certain models first, and who you move first. I don't want to move like Aragorn first because there's two bubbles he can't get through. I need his two buddies to go pop that guy, and then Aragorn can run through the middle and off the wizard that's standing at the back, or whoever it
Yeah,
happens
because
to be.
as soon as a model is engaged, its engagement bubble pops and it switches off, and it becomes an inert model that you can just walk straight past. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so like how those engagement bubbles work and overlap. And it's one of the things that's quite nice, like, is that it means that the units like the pike blocks and the spears are made up of individual units that you can form up in any way you like and happen to want them to put them together. But it naturally, emergently becomes tactically superior to put a pike block as a pike block because they have like extended sort of ranges with their pikes. But what you want to do is have like guys at the front who are a bit more armored, whose engagement bubble protects the pikes, and the pikes line up behind them and fight through them. And so really interestingly, that system builds in like accurate building of spear units and accurate building of pike blocks just naturally emergently, like, hardcore tournament players given that set of rules, when, oh, the best way to play these units is the narratively correct way to play these units. It's not, having pikes pointing in the wrong direction, or some weirdness. It was like,
Right. It's not walking your demon prince backwards into combat.
yeah, exactly. So it's like that sort of the engagement system and engagement ranges is a really sort of lovely little system that works really nicely in the sort of both the narrative version, where it's like, as we were playing, it was constantly like, okay, we need to get the engagement bubbles to cover Frodo, because like
Mm.
in the Fellowship stories, for obvious reasons, Frodo is often an auto win condition. If you can kill him,
Yeah, in the scenarios, yeah.
evil automatically wins, and so the good guys are constantly looking at their engagement bubbles to cover the halflings, to protect the halflings. And then in the strategy battle game, those bubbles become the thing that makes it work, as far as it does work as a massed battle game, because it's about sort of building units whose bubbles protect each other and overlap each other and allow them to multiple engage oncoming attackers, and etc. etc. So again, I think that's a really nice system, and I think that's part of why I say I don't know that I would change much with the Lord of the Rings Middle Earth strategy battle game, because I would change it different versions. It's like, I would, if I was doing the mass battle version, I would change things, um,
Interesting.
because I
Yeah.
think that
So
there's,
all right, so I've got some bones to pick. These aren't like none of these are critical issues, but I think like the things that make me go when I've been playing it these first few times. So because we've already talked about it, let's just quickly touch on the three different resources and the many points to track.
mm,
One thing I wonder is about fate. So each model has one wound,
mm,
mostly. Some
yeah,
some have got two wounds.
yeah,
And what fate points do is they give you half a wound extra on average.
yeah, sure,
And you pretty much only spend them when you lose your last wound. And there isn't any saving throws. So I guess like what is curious is that it doesn't always save you. So it's not complete plot armor.
mm.
But it is a thing that you have to track. And I guess I just wonder if there's a way of like it looks a lot like a saving throw and it works a lot like a saving throw, but it's like a limited use saving throw. I guess I just wonder about it because it's just like everyone has some of these things. Is there a way of simplifying it so that it doesn't have to be a tracked? I mean, it's weird because like wounds are a tracked thing anyway. So like,
Mm.
could it be a general rule that like every wound is a 4-up save or something?
Well, I think the thing is that I think the thing that's interesting about fate points is that they put this sort of extra weight onto the narrative idea that it's a last ditch thing to fight, to save the person. Because like a lot, quite a few of the heroes do have like a couple of wounds. Not
Hmm.
most people don't, but very few things have more than a couple of wounds.
Hmm.
But like Frodo, for example, has two wounds and has a couple of fate points, and so having the first wound just always go and you just let it go and you don't do anything about it, and then having the last wound have a stack of multiple saves changes, I think, the narrative beats. Like if both wounds each had a save, each wound would feel as important as the other. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So it would almost be like it's almost like I've got I've got D3 plus one wounds on Frodo at the start of the game, but that is obscure to everyone. We don't know whether I've
Mm.
got two wounds or four wounds or
and
three wounds.
and the narrative, the cinematic of discovering how many you've got, is always bouncing around the last fatal important wound that will have the whole game
Yeah.
turn on if it goes one way or the other.
Yeah, we never care about that first half dead state because it happens, it ramps the tension up.
Yeah, exactly. So I think like the fate points as opposed to more wounds with more saves is it's creating a tension curve for the game. If
Hmm.
every wound was the same and every wound like had chances to be saved, etc., etc., you'd have a more sort of constant thing of like, oh, he saved the first wound, great, you know that oh no,
Hmm.
he saved that first wound 2 or 3 times, now he's lost it. That first wound was very dramatic, and then the second wound you just get stabbed and died. Well, okay, that was an odd way for the narrative to go. Whereas the fate points narratively guarantee emergently that the last wound, the one that's actually going to kill him, the one that's, you know, him being stabbed by the cave troll and then revealing that he has the mithril shirt and all that sort of stuff. It's the last wound that always has all of the narrative tension and all of the eyes of the players sort of stacked on it. So again, it's this very narrative thing. And again, it's lovely that it's emerging because you could spend all of your fate points on your first wound. It makes no tactical difference whether you spend it on your first wound or your last wound. It doesn't actually like alter the likelihood of you surviving longer. But no,
No, but it does actually provide some information. Now that we've reframed it as a random wound count, like maybe the smart choice is to burn your fate points early so that you know whether you've got that last wound or not.
but nobody does. Nobody
No,
spends
I
their
know, it's
points
weird.
on the first wound. It's always for the last wound because that's the way that the narrative works.
Mm.
That's the cinematics. That's the human thing to do.
The way of dealing with this, I'm not at all suggesting this would be better, but it's fun to think about, is to say, well, every hero has a deck of cards, and there are like, two saves and one wound or whatever. And so then you shuffle them and you put the safe on the top, and it's like, well, okay, safe. He's safe. Oh, he was dead, and he was always going to be dead at that point. Like something which is, it's not input output randomness, but it's like the randomness is done in advance. Fate is set, and then you discover it together. Because I think one thing that's just got a little flavor that's slightly unsatisfying is that so many things in the game are a 4 up, and
Mm.
so I just I spend my fate point and I roll this 4 up, and when it does happen or when it doesn't happen, it's kind of, I don't know. It's not that it's a non-event, but it's just like there's not that much texture to the discovery.
I know what you mean. I mean, it's sort of ironic that you've been like, oh, there's so much tracking in this game. You know what it needs is an individual deck of cards for every single model on the table. That will really.
Yeah, no, which is absolutely why I'm not suggesting it's the right thing, but like the pre-discover, like the pre-setting of things. Like in Perilous Tales, I love the fact that the threat markers that you turn over and discover, like that could just be a dice roll, or you could just draw a card or whatever. But the fact that the damn thing's been sat on the table winking at me has
It
like
was
an emotional texture to it.
yeah. That when you can put something down that was always what it was going to be, but you didn't know what it was going to be. That does.
Yeah, so Frodo was always going to die on the third hit. We just
Yeah,
didn't know it.
yeah. But the thing, I mean, the thing is, of course, like deterministically speaking, the dice are always going to come up what the dice are going to come up. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah,
not
yeah,
it's
yeah,
not like
yeah.
you're actually using powers to influence them. If Frodo was going to die on the third dice roll, he was going to always die on the third dice roll,
Well, I mean,
just as
that's
much.
a huge question we don't have time to to cover on this podcast. I
I,
think another thing that's interesting to me, because I design the sort of games which are in some cases relatively chunky and crunchy. So the experience of playing, um, I'm just going to call it mess bag because I think that's how you can unpack that acronym. The experience of playing mess bag is actually pretty decent by a GW standard, in that, right, you really only need 2 books. You need the core rule book and you need the book with the Lord of the Rings armies in, or you can play with the Hobbit ones, whatever you do you. Um, and there is a fair amount of cross-referencing and looking things up, because there's a reasonable amount of like keywording and sort of rules as formulas and stuff, which is fine and something that I'm guilty of as well. So it's kind of fun for me to play a bit of a crunchier game, because I spend a lot of time playing indie games, and to sort of be on the sharp end of what it's going to be like to experience second edition Billion Suns. So I don't know that I'm making a point specifically here outside of like um you've been very complimentary about the emergent systems, and I think that one of the cost of entry there is that there does have to be a number of systems, all of which you have to look up, and then they interact if you play them correctly in a
Mm,
surprising and delightful way. If I had played that scenario and I hadn't clocked the like um the thing where the will points or whatever, the might points of the ring wraiths are eroding away, I would have had a completely different experience just from like, there are so many rules that I had to load up into my brain. It could have been any one of those 38 rules that I needed to load in that was the emergent key that unlocked the magic of the scenario, but I
mm,
wouldn't have been able to know that the first time round. And so, like, although that game was very beautiful, it was also extremely fragile
mm.
to through complexity.
And it is one of the funny things I think about it is that it's still such a GW game, and a lot of its like problems are barely noticeable when you are inured to the ways of GW, and absolutely obliterating when you are not.
Mm,
The fact that it's like, okay, well, there are these phases. Well, they're the sorts of phases that happen in fantasy battle. Yeah, well, yeah, kind of. They have some tweaks. Okay, let me learn the tweaks, and then it's like, okay, do I have how much of this massive chunky big book do I have to like get into my bloodstream? The majority of it, all right, fair enough. That's how these things go.
yeah.
Let's memorize these 80 pages to within an inch of their life is like, well, this is the cost of doing business. And like you say, if you come from indie gaming, if you don't come from miniatures gaming, that is just like you're a lunatic who would choose to do this with their free time.
Yeah, so like I don't have like specific scalpels to draw necessarily, but like I would be looking at this game if it was given to me to edit, for example, I would be looking at this game and trying to figure out like where I can get 10 pages of everything that you need to know,
Mm,
and where there are some things which just obviously happen all the time, like a dude charges into two dudes. Like just make it really clear what's going on and how to deal with some of those situations. And like there is a section on that, but it's like on page 48
mm,
of like 90 pages of rules that I'm going to have to ingest. And I think that like in a game with lots of moving pieces that are not clockworked together, like eighth edition Warhammer Fantasy Battle has a similarly thick rule book, but
mm.
you can get rules wrong and the game doesn't fail to run.
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting thing that like the
And
thing
this
I
is like this is a good thing and a bad thing. This is
yeah,
not like a straight up.
yeah, and this is the thing. It's like the thing I like about mess bag is that all the rules that are in there are sort of juice that's worth the squeeze in that like they're all actually doing something. You've
Although I
actually
haven't knocked someone off a horse yet. Oh no,
yeah
actually, I did in my first game. Yeah, we knocked someone off a horse. That's like I read that bit. I was like, all right, okay, cool, fine, yep, all
yeah.
right.
Whereas
Got to
like
paint up two guys.
Whereas, like, Warhammer Fantasy Battle has, in a way more redundant parts. It has a whole bunch of stuff that doesn't really. It's like it feels like that game could be a lot more stripped down, and you wouldn't lose anything of the experience. Whereas I feel like with Messbag, in things you strip out of it, you would lose a part of the experience, a rare part, one that doesn't generally come up, but when it does, you sort of miss it. And I think
Yeah,
that's
or when it does come up, it's heroed as part of a scenario. Like it's really
mm,
important how the jumping rules work when it's like, the Bridge of Kazakh Doom or whatever, and you've got to figure out whether everybody gets across or not. And presumably there are rules for tossing people, and that's going to matter.
yeah, absolutely. I think that the main thing about mess bag that people talk about that I think is probably worth addressing at some point is that it's a game of sixes. And it's like there's a weird thing, and when we played, the third person who's playing hadn't ever played the system before, and this is a thing that he had a real mental hook point on, that in the game, when you fight, you roll your number of attacks, and then you look at the highest number and you compare your highest number to the other person's highest number. And if someone has the highest number, they just win. It doesn't matter what your fight value is. It doesn't matter how skilled a combatant you are. If I've got Boromir and I roll 3 4s, and you've got a lowly goblin and you roll 1 6, the goblin stabs Boromir. And Boromir going, but I fight value 6 and yours is 3, is like, we just don't care. It just is not
Yeah,
relevant.
today you rolled a 3. Tough luck.
Yeah, and what a lot of people say about the game, and to a degree, it's a game about rolling high dice repeatedly. And again, it's there for the fate points, where it's like, well, if I keep rolling 6s when I take my fate roll, I am immortal, and you can just suck it. And to a degree, those things are like, the point of might is that you can use it to change. So there is like dice mitigation. You can use it to change dice, and various people have re-rolls and etc. etc. So it is like, well, no, to be fair, if Boromir goes up against a lowly goblin and it's the first fight of the game, the goblin literally cannot win, because even if Boromir rolls a 1 and the goblin rolls a 6, Boromir can go 5 might points, suck it. Now I'm kicking your head right off. He wouldn't, because that'd be a stupid waste. But the point is, he could. And I think, like, again, it's one of these things that's like, we explained it to our friend, and he was just like, I'm just not getting it. And I had to keep saying, it's like, yeah, but it does emergently work that Boromir will consistently and always
and
a
like
whole bunch of goblins.
to really get into the gritties of this. So like, if I was designing this system and I was thinking to myself, okay, so like, I've got a dice roll, it's a straight dice off, and then only then, if we tie, would we compare this, like, what appears to be a fundamental stat. Maybe this doesn't feel right. So maybe I should shift, like, one mechanic is that you roll a number of dice equal to your attacks. Okay, so maybe I should roll a number of dice equal to my fight instead. Okay, well, now a goblin gets like only a couple of throws of the dice, but Boromir may have, like, 8 throws of the dice, and now, like, it's kind of ludicrous, and now we don't have a way of doing a tie other than maybe like rolling another dice, or the evil player always losing. So then you could say, well, okay, well, if we're only going to ever look at one dice and then we're going to compare the fight, like, maybe the fight should just be a static value that we, like, add on to this, or maybe the dice that we use should be a larger format of dice so that we can, like, get a broader spread of numbers. But of course, we're making a game that only uses d6 because it's a kind of a kid's GW game.
And the funny thing is that, like, emergently, what actually happens is that the way the system works is that it isn't only a game of 6s, and the various changes you sort of talked about there would make it into a game of 6s. If what we did was we rolled the dice and we added on our fight values, well, that would mean that Boromir could repeatedly lose fights, because he could roll a 1 and add on even his mighty fight value to a 7, and the goblin could roll a 6 and add his puny might value of 2 and beat Boromir. In practice, what happens is Boromir rolls 3 dice, which almost always you're going to get at least 1 5. Boromir has 6 might and has a fight of 6, and if you draw, you compare your fight values. So always Boromir's always hitting 5s. If he's not hitting a 6, he's pipping it to a 6, and he's always having the better fight value. So it's like, on paper, it feels like, well, this is stupid. Boromir can repeatedly get capped by goblins. In practice, as we saw when we played through the scenario, the heroes just go, no, it's not apparently a game of rolling 6s, because we are bulletproof against these goblins.
Yeah, well, because it's actually a resource management game on very many levels, and the fact that the dice is just like, it's just a straight dice off for every combat gives you this tight little spread of results, which means that the resource spend can be nice. It can be, a small resource spend can have a big impact. You can have a small pool of resources and you can have an impact over, like, if it was a D20 system, you'd have to have, dozens of might points in order to get the same effect. And so it actually leans into the the weakness of the D6 being the lack of granularity in the results, here becomes a strength because of the way that this system has been manipulated. Even though on the face of it, you're just like, oh, it's just a roll off. Like every
Yeah,
fight's just a roll off, and it's like,
a-
well, it is until all the other mechanics that have been actually designed into the game turn it
yeah,
into something else.
absolutely. And it means that heroes can be consistently heroic without needing buckets of dice to be rolled. Because like Aragorn and Boromir, the mightiest warriors in the game, have 3 attacks, which like when you come from Warhammer Fantasy Battle, where you have characters who have like 10 attacks, it's like 3 is a puny number of attacks. But it's like,
Mm,
well, no, because that means that they're pretty consistently hitting 5s and 6s when they roll their dice, and that's all that matters. And so they don't need to roll 5, 6, 7, 8 dice because the spread of a d6 is very tight. You only need to roll like 3 of them, and you're very consistently hitting the highest number on the dice. And once you've hit the highest number, we track back to their special rules, and then they can just be consistent like killers,
mm, mm.
despite the fact it's always based on dice rolls. And so you never know, it could be that a goblin takes down it. So you get all that narrative of the lowly goblin could take down Aragorn, but you get, practically speaking, realistically, no, he can't. Aragorn will absolutely hose through them like a knife through butter. And
Mm.
so it's one of these things where it's like, on paper it seems to be this game of sixes. In practice, it's like, oh, actually, it's been put together in a way that heroic characters, because of like you say, the narrowness of a d6 and the way that the mechanics work, without having ostentatious stat lines of like numbers that are the difference between a goblin and Aragorn. Like I say, a number of attacks is from 1 to 3 attacks. That's a tiny like window.
And this I think is another like double underlining of like, as long as there is a hero involved, whether it's a hero fighting a hero or a hero fighting a goblin, we have an interesting system. If you charge ranks of infantry into each other, this stuff just melts away and we're just flipping coins.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why, like, again, the strategy battle game, has to work so much more about the engagement zones and the movement, because
Yeah, and I know that every army is fielding lots of these things, but like for me, it's absolutely critical that like you zoom in on this as the absolute focus of the game.
yeah, no, absolutely. And it is a weird thing because, like I say, the mass battle game version of it, I think, is a sort of a weird kind of janky thing, because it's like you say, between like non-hero combatants, it's basically always a bunch of coin flips, which then means that the movement and the engagement of the game becomes incredibly important, because it doesn't matter how like elite my dudes are, it's going to be a coin flip unless I'm very careful about my engagement zones and who I hit and where I bring forces to bear, in
Mm.
weight of numbers and all these sorts of things. So it's, again, the weird janky like mass battle version game, it sort of pooped out that the game's biggest weakness is the thing that makes it work when it works.
Mm.
It does mean that if you haven't like fully engaged with those engagements, those tactics, and those strategies, it is like a whole bunch of people running each other and they're flipping coins, and then you go, okay, well, here's a process game. Let's see who it turns out won. Oh, look, goblins today.
Yeah, and also as I learned because I hadn't worked out how to engage with this puzzle, what happens is you casually move a bunch of dudes, like 2 units together, and then you have this baffling set of like, wait, so now the game wants me to pair them up? What
Mm,
on earth? And like, if you do that after the movement phase rather than before it, the game is just really gnarly.
yeah, yeah, no, absolutely.
And you're just like, what are we doing here? So I think, like, in summary, this is why when we said let's redesign the Lord of the Rings miniatures game, we didn't really get gritty on the exactly how we would tackle a skirmish system, because as you say, there's a lot to love in this original system.
Yeah, and I think because
Is this
it's so
Priestley? Is this Rick Priestley's game?
Alessio I think Alessio was lead on it from
Nice. Okay, so
memory.
this is an Alessio game.
He's certainly one of, yeah, he was always listed as the ring bearer back in the day. So
Nice.
I think it was Alessio from memory.
Right.
Um,
Credit where credit's due. It is a very lovely piece of clockwork.
It is, and I think, and what I'd say is like part of the reason I wouldn't go in and sort of say I'd redesign this and I'd change that is because it's so emergent, because it's such a Jenga tower of mechanics. I know that I don't understand what would change when I change things. Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
Because it's like like I say, oh, it's about the D6 spread and it's about this and it's about that. It's about probabilities and spreads, and you know, it is put together by somebody who has, I think, an unbelievable understanding of the genre of miniatures games, and has, was at the peak of their powers. And I know that if you just pulled out one or two of those rules or twisted one or two of those rules, a whole bunch of weird cascading crap would happen that, I don't think I understand it well enough to go fudging around with it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I guess like in short, that's kind of why we didn't get into the detail of trying to redesign the mechanics of it. But hopefully that's sort of a bit more of an examination of some of the things that make it such an interesting little um little gem of a game, I think, in many ways. And I'm not
Yeah, and as ever, hopefully the digestion of this is, I mean, certainly I'm taking away ideas and things I want to experiment with as well. So hopefully you at
yeah.
home are as well.
Yeah, and it's not perfect and it doesn't always sing, but the things it does very sort of cleverly and subtly and under the hood, and in many ways, that I think of really, really admirable.
I mean, that's one thing about miniatures games that you can always say, like they never guarantee to sing because,
Mm.
it's not like a discreetly contained board game where you kind of know what you're getting. Like
Yeah,
it's the exciting cost of entry here that even if you write a really good miniatures game, sometimes it's just a dud.
yeah, and it's weird to say of Middle-earth strategy battle game, given how much stuff there is sort of proverbially above the hood, how much is going on underneath the hood. It's like
Mm.
there's this book like that thick, and yet a lot of the singing things are things that aren't really physically in that book and are sort of hidden and clever and under the surface. Well, look, if you've listened to this conversation and you think we're right or wrong about the things that the game does, please swing down to the comment section. Let us know the bits you think we've missed, the things that we've overestimated or underestimated, the things you would change, and why you think that would be a safe and wise thing to surgically extract out. Um, if you've not played Middle Earth strategy battle game and we've encouraged you to do so, please let us know. And we love to encourage hobby if at all possible. If you've played it and had a really horrible experience and you think that I'm a fool for saying that I think it's a good and clever game, let us know that as well. While you're down there in the comments section, hit like and subscribes because number go up good, and check the links section down there where there's links across to various places, including our Discord, where you can chat to us about mess bag and other acronyms, as well as like see people working on their own games. There are links across to our Patreons where you can go over and you can support the channel directly, or there are links to various projects that we're working on across things like Kickstarter or our own sites or the sites of people who sell the things which we have done. And you can go to any of those and you can support us on the channel indirectly. But for now, I think from this episode and this Rule of Carnage, it's going to be a thank you and goodbye. So thank you and goodbye. Bye bye.
Goodbye.